Hey everybody, welcome to the Find and Follow podcast, where we are all about helping you find and follow Jesus in your everyday life. Kyle and Scott are your co-hosts today with a special guest. I'm going to say guest, but a friend of Mission Church, David Lewellyn. Welcome to the podcast. We are glad you are here today.
Hey, thanks for having me here. I'm glad to be here. And I was going to say to you, happy Pastor Appreciation Month to those who celebrate.
Right back at you there, buddy.
All right. We're celebrating.
I didn't know it was until I got an email in my inbox from our district. It was like, oh, here's what I want to say. I was like, oh, yeah, that thing.
Hey.
Right back at you, buddy.
There's a day for everything. Let's get a whole month for pastors.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, many of our listeners are going to know you because you were just with us a couple months ago. And in longer than that, we've been partnering together in different youth things and stuff over several decades. But for those that are at Mission Church, you were with us as a guest speaker in our Voices series, first week of August. It was wonderful. Excellent message. So it was good to have different voices. So thanks for coming on the podcast. It's a little more casual than Sunday. We get to banter and get to know one another. And so for those listening that don't know you, hit us up with a little bit of David Lewellyn, the hobby farmer.
Oh, my goodness.
I was just joking. We were talking about hobby farms right before we pushed record. So, yeah, tell us about you, your family, your favorite color, whatever you got.
Well, my name is David, as you mentioned, and I do like orange. That's a color I enjoy. But I don't like favorites. My thing that I've learned I'm bad at is like hypotheticals and like exact stuff. You know? So it's like
rank the top five.
Pick one favorite, yeah.
Yeah. So, but then I have a rule. So like the hypotheticals, it's if hey, if you had $1 billion, what would you do? You just got to give it all to charity. You just do whatever thing makes you look the most generous.
Oh, okay.
Because it's never going to happen.
That's a great answer. It kind of ends the conversation.
So since I
quick.
know I'm bad at trying to figure those, like I want to be so precise, I just decide to go the opposite and go, I don't know, give it all away. Anyway, I have my wife and I have been married since 2005. We grew up in the small town of Ephrata together, so I guess you could say we're high school sweethearts even. But we have 3 daughters, 14, 11, and 9, although 10 this month. And we're living life. We are currently working to start a church in the Spokane area sometime in the next 12 months or so, which you guys could ask a lot of questions about that, and I'd be happy to tell you I don't know yet.
The hypothetical questions?
Yeah.
I got a lot of hypotheticals.
If you had $1 million to start a church, what would you do?
Yeah, I'd do it. But excited about that. The questions are like, why start a new church in Spokane? Aren't there already churches in Spokane? And the answer is yes. But statistically, which I'm not that driven by stats, but statistically, there are more churches in the nation that close every year than start. So there are fewer churches each year than there were the year before. And then the thing about new churches is they reach new people constantly. And so those are exciting things. But the reason we're trying to start a church is we feel compelled by the Spirit to do so. And I believe in the resurrected Jesus, man. I really believe that there's nothing like a person getting a hold of the gospel and having it change their lives. And so to be a part of that and to create a community and be a part of a community where we're growing and following Jesus together, finding and following Jesus together is
great plug.
Something I'm excited and looking forward to.
Super cool.
That's what we're doing, yep.
And you've been pastoring in Spokane since, you were like 12 years old or something like that?
Yeah, I've been in Spokane. I moved here when I grew up in that small town. I did what everybody else did when they graduated high school, and I left.
See ya.
And came to Spokane. So I've been here since 2002, and I've been serving in church that whole time. But started doing pastoral ministry in 2004 after I interned for a couple of years. I had kind of a similar path to you, but then you went down to sunny California.
Yeah, I did.
Right. And David, you're not the first Lewellyn on the podcast as a guest, but you might be the best one.
Oh.
That's to be determined. And there's a few more Lewellyns we could have on the podcast because, like you mentioned, large family. There's 6 kids. Nathan was on 2 years ago. And Kyle was a roommate to your other brother, Jonathan, in college for a year. You guys were roommates? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so growing up with...
We could have another Mission Church pastor on another Lewellyn who is also a Mission Church pastor on the Mission Church Find and Follow podcast.
Yeah, my sister pastors a church in Clarkston that's called Mission Church.
Yeah.
which is crazy, but cool,
Yeah.
right? A lot of churches on mission. So growing up, you have 2 brothers, 3 sisters, right?
That's right.
So between the 3 brothers, who's the funniest?
Between the 2 brothers?
Yeah, no, between all 3 of you.
Between the 3 brothers, probably my sister Emily.
Okay. All right, that's fair.
Funniest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you guys, I know Nathan's youngest.
Yeah.
I don't know your guys' age differences.
So I have 2 older sisters,
Okay.
and then everybody else is younger than me. Then after me is my brother Jonathan, who was roommates with Kyle in college. Then my sister Emily and my youngest brother Nathan, who was on the podcast.
Yeah. Did you guys wrestle? Could you still take your brother? Who if you guys got together right now, who would take who?
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
So again, I answer hypotheticals with theories.
When you were younger, did you guys actually like wrestle, take each other, or no? Is that not a thing in the Lewellyn household?
My brother Jonathan, not interested in that at all. He is, that's not his thing. He was doing his hair or something. I don't know. But Nathan and I, Nathan's 6 years younger than me. And so because of that, he was a kind of a typical younger brother, and I was more typical of an older brother than I care to admit. And so when he was in that age of like, I want to do what my older brother does, I want to be around my older brothers and whatever like that, he got to be a bit too much for me. And so we would definitely get after each other. Uh-huh. And Nathan is he's bigger than me now. He's taller than me and stronger than me and harder working, better looking, more hair. I mean, all of it.
Now, he did say you're a better guitar player than him.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
All right.
And honestly, Scott, it's not even close.
Well, no, he said it wasn't like he didn't even hesitate. He's because we're talking about if the Lewellyns could put a band together. Yeah. He said he would have to carry most of it.
Yeah, he would.
But he did say you are far in a way the better guitar player.
Yeah, he would still have to carry it because I wouldn't show up to practice on time. I wouldn't be. So Nathan and I fought. Yeah. I remember when he got strong. There was definitely a moment when we had like a railing over our stairway, and he picked me up and slammed me against it and like dangled me, and my mom was crying, and he's just red with rage, and that was like, oh, okay, so this is different now a little bit. And,
Tables have turned.
Yeah, so we haven't really talked since he was in the 8th grade or so. But,
maybe we should have another episode where you both are on, and we could do a little mediation for you.
But we didn't fight that much. Everybody was pretty independent. It was a small town, so we could go wherever we wanted. So everybody kind of just went on their own and did. We were pretty independent. But I do appreciate having a family that we all enjoy each other. So we all get together every year and hang out. And I work with many of my family right now. Is the church that's sending me to plant and getting to work with Summit Church here in Spokane. Many of my family are working there. So I actually work with Nathan now.
Yeah.
Because so you grew up in that home with lots of brothers and sisters, but your parents were pastoring a church in Ephrata at that time, and then you came to Spokane, and now, again, much of your family is pastoring in Spokane now.
Yeah, many moved this way. Yeah.
So when we have guests on, we just love to hear stories of how you found Jesus, and obviously, as people are listening, they're going, "Oh, well, probably just at home." But everyone's story of the resurrected Jesus and coming to faith in Christ is important and significant. What was your journey in finding Jesus? What were some significant moments for you along the way?
I actually took some time this year to reflect on that. Probably when I was younger, I had more of a, I don't know if it's an insecurity, but it was like, my testimony or my story of Jesus seems somewhat unremarkable. But now I think back on what God has saved me from, or I see as a quiet faithfulness of God has been, I'm just so grateful. Because I was raised in a family that, this is what I'd say, is I was raised in a family that normalized Jesus. And so growing up, it was always just, Jesus was included in everyday conversation. Jesus was included in decisions and things we had to, and if we were in a disagreement or an argument or something, Jesus was included in our reconciliation or our forgiveness. So there's a real normalization of Jesus, and because of that, there was never an extreme Jesus moment. of conversion or something. There was just this steady faithfulness of God. And so as I take time, I turned 40 this year, which so I'm gonna buy a convertible and no, I don't know.
No, you have to wait till you're 45 to do that.
Is that when?
Yeah.
Because of inflation?
Well, I just think we're living longer, so they're not midlife yet.
Maybe you're living longer.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I did take some reflection time. I don't know. I don't think I had some kind of crisis, but the reflection was just seeing the steady faithfulness of God. And there's been moments where I've had to step out in faith, not knowing what's going to happen. But the amount of times that God has responded in faith beyond what I could have imagined is really incredible. So I got asked on this past Sunday, some guy had heard my dad preach at something, so he knew that I was a pastor's kid. And you maybe get asked this, or God asked this thing. So did you go off and rebel? Because everybody that knows a pastor's kid, they know that they've had some kind of crazy, like you're a huge heroin bender.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't. It's
I don't
the
know if
dark
that's your real
era.
story, but
we don't talk about it much. But thanks for bringing it up. Yeah, it's almost sometimes people I feel like ask this as though you're expected to have that season, and almost sometimes people are excited to hear about that season. Like, hey, yeah, you have permission to go rebel because everybody does. Is the kind of the tone that some, I'm not talking about this guy, but some people ask that, like, yeah, when was your time? Like, I didn't have a time.
And you didn't either.
No.
Yeah, I didn't.
Not like extreme.
Sure.
You guys were both perfect your whole life. I get it. Okay.
That's why we're on this couch
Yeah,
and you're on
exactly.
that couch.
My dad just worked at a golf course. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Well, we all have our cross to bear. Yeah, I mean, growing up, like shut up was a bad word, and I'm sorry to the listeners for saying
Sorry,
it.
Mom.
But
You don't want your butt to get in trouble saying that one.
Yeah. We don't say butt either. We say bottom. But yeah, I never had some big rebellion outwardly, but that doesn't mean you don't have an inward wrestle of, trying to figure out faith and direction and belief. And because there are definite moments where I was grateful to be raised in a family of faith, but there's that point where you go, this is my faith, and God, much like your own physical adolescence, you have to become an adult. I had to grow up in faith, and I still feel like every day I'm growing in faith. I had to apologize yesterday to my kids for losing my temper and yelling, which is not a great parenting technique, although effective at times.
It can get results quickly.
I just felt terrible. I was like, I don't want to be this, and I had to apologize to them because I'm still growing. But to me, I want that to be spiritual and discipleship. That part of when I mess up like that too. So,
As you think back now that you're in the season of raising kids, and I'm assuming a little bit here, you're bringing Jesus into your everyday life for your family and your kids, what you experienced. Like, what are some key things that you're doing or that your parents and family did that's been helpful that you've carried on, or some things you've added to your guys' life? That's the whole point of this whole podcast, is to just hopefully help people live every day following Jesus and not necessarily have these super high special moments or think that God only exists at church or at a camp and I can only connect with them there. Because I had a similar experience, and I'm trying to do the same thing as far as bring the everyday conversation about who God is and how we live. I think that's what Jesus wants. So to help some of those that are listening that go, I don't have that experience, didn't have that experience. So my frame of reference is like, I don't know, I go to church and the pastor kind of tells, and then I ship my kid over there to hopefully learn something from someone, and then we kind of don't really circle back around to it at home. So you have that generational experience. What's been key for you?
well, Scott, I don't know if you remember, our last longer form conversation was me begging you for parenting advice. So I don't know why you're now going, hey, why don't you give us some parenting advice?
You have 3 girls, and I feel underqualified with 1 girl. So again, I think it's
Well, that was very kind to you because you introduced me to your daughter, and you let me get some advice from her about how to care for my daughters, which was great.
And we both stood there just
wonderful.
learning together.
Exactly,
Just like,
exactly.
Please tell us, help us.
I mean, truthfully, my wife is so incredible too, and she's been a girl her whole life, so she understands that part way better than I do, the girl part. But she really just is so good at loving our girls, supporting them in who they are individually, But then also the Jesus part is really, really important to her, and she has been great. So even we homeschool our girls. When I say we, generously to myself, because Janice really does an incredible job with that. But even as I was leaving today, they're reading the Bible together and they sing songs. So it's not. I'm not saying everybody should do mini church, whatever. That's a rhythm we've built in, though, is to engage our kids with Scripture young. And then this morning we got some bad news about some friends that were going through some hard stuff. So we gathered our family together, gathered the girls, and said, we're just going to pray real quick for this family. So I'm trying to normalize Jesus. We want to normalize Jesus, and I also fail at that and trying to normalize that Jesus meets us in our failures too. So I think probably the best thing that I can offer my kids is the reality of Jesus in my life. And some of that is sometimes aspirational, I suppose, where it's like I wish I was more like Christ in this area. But I try to share that too and not just use it as an excuse to go, oh, I'm not there yet. But it's just that living what Jesus is doing in you, out of you. And I think that's what I'm responsible for. I don't need to be more than I am because he's more than enough. So as long as I want to give an example of leaning into Jesus. And it's the example, as I think through people in faith that I look up to, those are the people. They're the people that are real with their faith, that are leaning into Jesus. They're not the ones necessarily that have it all together. So that's every part of life, but I think especially in parenting. You did youth ministry for a long time too, and you learn it real quick, but you can teach what you know, but you reproduce who you are in discipleship. And the best discipleship is always going to be in proximity, which I think is why Jesus gave us his proximity, came to the earth, put on the flesh of humanity. So that's a heavy burden sometimes when I go, I'm reproducing who I am in my kids.
Yeah.
And then that I have to remind myself, Christ is reproducing who he is within me. And I trust that. That's enough. So that's a long way to say I don't know.
Super good, though. Super good.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you started out with is it's so important if you want to raise a godly family is to marry someone who's godly. And we don't have to go down this rabbit trail of just the value of people following Jesus together and from the get-go. And sometimes people find Jesus after they get married or as adults. But, man, if you're a young person not married and you want to follow Jesus, find someone who loves Jesus, and then you guys getting closer to Jesus will make you closer together. Mm-hmm. And so it really is fundamental. It's hard. A house divided can't stand, is what Jesus said. So it's hard to raise godly kids and be a godly household when someone's not on board. And it happens, people drift or whatever, but man, that's so fundamental, and to honor marriage and to make God a priority within your household. And as a man, it's part of that humility to go, I don't have all the answers and I don't know, but Christ in me is enough, and let's turn to God in hard times when friends are going through hard times or when we're uncertain or we need direction. This is who we turn to. And as men to go, I don't know, I don't have all the answers, and not to fake it, but to go, I'm certain about who does, and so let's all lean into who Jesus is. So, yeah, it's the way of Jesus in everyday life, and so I'm grateful in my story that my parents were that way and kind of took the church, growing up in part of church, took the businessy side of it, and what God is and following Jesus wasn't just a church experience, if that makes sense. It was, this is who we are. And part of who we are is we gather with other believers and we serve in this way. But first and foremost, we're people who follow Jesus. Sometimes people's, I think, perspective and experiences, like first and foremost is I'm a church person. I go to church, and then Jesus comes after that. And it's just not the way we follow Jesus. So, but so you following Jesus through high school, you didn't have a rebellion period, and then you jump into serving. And talk to us a little bit about that experience, internship, but then what have you been doing for the last 20 years before you're starting a new church here?
Can I go back to the other thing? You
Sure.
were saying that was good. So I wonder if that's harder with kids, though, too. Here's the thing. I know a lot more than my kids. They think they know more than me. I think sometimes, and actually sometimes they maybe do, but the when you know more than someone, it's easy to like be like I have the answers, you know. But then the key of parenting is to point them toward the answer, and so you're like, oh, how do I not answer, but instead point them to the answers, to where they're not just leaning on me. How do I really show them and teach them to lean on Jesus? And that's a tricky thing, man. That's how I kind of was processing what you were saying there, and I think that's really helpful. I should write it down. Or rewatch the podcast.
I was going to say, I'm going to rewatch you. I'm sitting over here with the 2-year-old that I left at home with my wife this morning going, I should be taking notes over here from these wise fathers over here.
Stumbling through, it feels like at times. And yeah, it's one of those things. Every season has different challenges and where kids are at and pointing them to who Christ is. Jesus was kind of, I think, picked on, if that's even a thing, where someone would ask him a question and he wouldn't answer their question. Mm-hmm. And he would go a different route, or he would ask a question back, or they would ask a question seemingly about this topic and he'd be over here talking about this. And you're like, I'm sure people went away from in the crowds going, I got lost there, right? And that's where Jesus all the time was like, hey, if you got ears and eyes to understand what's happening, you're going to see the spiritual ramifications. Yeah. We could keep going on this. We have a senior in high school, so it's like this season of going. It feels like the runway is real short. It's not, but there's the last of certain things, and it changes when they graduate high school, which I haven't got there yet. But it feels like we're in the airplane and we're taxiing down the runway, and are we going to have enough speed for takeoff? Because the runway runs out, right? Is the emotional part of it. Not that it doesn't continue. I still have a relationship with my dad. I still ask him questions. Yeah. You know, in a different way than I did when I was 15, 16,
But do you know
17.
more than your dad?
On certain things,
okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Wondering. He's not here, so he can't speak for himself.
Yeah, many a thing, no. But a lot of things, yes. Helped him with a Google Drive thing yesterday.
Okay. Technology, yes.
Dad, he's like, Dad.
Scripture references, I'm going to go to Craig.
Well, 1,000%.
No, my dad knows way more than me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my kids do too. I have wonderful kids too, as do you. It's pretty awesome to have. That's what it's like. Yeah, I'm playing on easy mode. My kids are so cool.
Got the cheat codes.
I like my kids. They're fun, and so it's like pretty awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So you like kids because you've done a lot of youth, young adult stuff. I'm trying to transition.
Yep, that's a great transition. Because you're like, hey, you remember how you derailed my question? Can we go back to it?
That's this podcast. We just banter. We go back and forth. Whatever is we want to chat about.
So when I was in, I say I grew up in Ephrata, which I did, but really that was only for middle school and high school years. So it was like that key adolescent time. I've lived in Spokane way longer than I ever lived in Ephrata, but it still has that place of like, this is the whole town that raised me, And the church my dad's church, we didn't really have a youth group, but we had a bunch of kids that were turning into youth age. And so they started a youth group. And this guy, Darrell Wall, who was just the hardest working guy, and he worked these long hours at his job, and on his lunch break, he would read his Bible. And whatever he got out of his Bible, that's what he'd come and bring us for youth group that week. And I had some friends that were just really wired to be evangelists. My buddy Bryce Klein was like just bringing. So a lot of kids started coming to this youth group, and God started to grow it. And I had felt at the time at a summer camp that God was like, I want you to be a part of this and lead worship. So I learned how to play guitar. I picked up a guitar and tried to learn how to play guitar and started leading worship. So all through high school, I led worship with this youth ministry. And man, it was exciting. Just lots of kids were coming to Jesus. We were having fun together. We were following Jesus together. And at the end of high school, I was like, well, I think I did what God asked me to do. And that was fun. I guess I'm done with this. And I'm going to do what everybody else did. I'm leaving town, And I was on this, we were on this trip in Haiti, which was crazy. We should not have been there, but we were.
You guys really left town. You're like,
and they asked, they asked me to bring a guitar and lead some songs. And so we would gather every night and just sing some songs and pray. And this was like just after I graduated high school, and I was going to go, figure out what to do. And I really felt like God said, I'm not done with this. And it was like, because I just thought I did what he asked.
Right.
So I changed my plans, and I started interning at a church in Spokane at Life Center, which was just one of the best things. It was just such a great time, and it was booming at that time. And God was doing really cool stuff. But I was interning with music. I was doing music stuff. But because God had done so much in my life in youth ministry when I was in youth, I was like, well, I'm just going to keep doing what I could. And so I would go and serve with the youth ministry too. So I'd either lead worship for them, I'd lead a small group, just whatever I could do. I was doing that while I was doing the worship internship. So at the end of that year, I was like, I think I want to do youth ministry. And so I switched an internship and interned a year with youth ministry and just served, and it was so exciting and fun. And then at the end of that, I was asked to step into the youth pastor role, the youth director role at that time. And I stayed working with youth for the next 20 years there, doing that, working with youth and young adults. Yeah.
What's one of, I caught myself there. What's one of the things that you find most satisfying and exciting about working with students, even when you were a student, working with your peers, and then, throughout the last 20 years, like, what is it that is part of your passion for that generation and that work?
So again, I'll start with the stats that don't necessarily move me, but they're true. If you're going to say yes to Jesus, you are probably going to say yes to Jesus before you turn 18 years old. But that being said, there's nothing like it. If you see a young person grab a hold of the gospel and have the gospel grab a hold of them, and to see God move in their life and see what God can do, it's just, no one's told them they can't yet, and they just like, and we can, and they'll just go after it. And the age of Jesus' disciples was most likely in that range, just young men that were following Jesus, teenagers even. And when you hear Ephesians 2:10, it says you're God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which He's prepared in advance for you to do. There aren't really any caveats to that. It's not once you turn 18. It's not once you know the Bible more. It's not once you've. It's none of that stuff. It's just Christ in you is the hope of glory immediately. And students, man, when they get that, they just go. And so it's been fun to see God move in the lives of young people. And I've had the pleasure then of seeing those people grow up and become parents, and I've done their weddings, and they've become pastors or missionaries or start Bible studies at their offices with works. And it's just fun to see the faithfulness of God over the long haul, because youth ministry is not often a ministry where you see immediate fruit. But if you hang on, you can see God really radically turn people's lives around over the long haul, like a cruise ship, Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about the blissful ignorance of a young person who just gets going on something. And like we said, they don't know as much, but sometimes I think that's the advantage, where they just go, Jesus is awesome. You don't, your buddy Bryce, right? You were saying, you don't know about Jesus? Why not? Like, they're just unabashed as far as their passion and their energy. Kyle, you were that way.
Yeah, that was totally me. That's totally my story. It's just like, this is legit, and this is life transforming and life altering. So it's like I just gave everything I had to it, because I was like, yep, this is what we do. And that's what I did youth ministry for 14 years, mm-hmm. It's just amazing to see that. And they're making so many, again, the runway is running out onto like this season of, like, they're making so many foundational decisions of who they are and what type of person they're going to be for the rest of their life. They're starting to build that foundation, right? So it's like, let's put that foundation on Jesus. And when they do that, again, and then to see the fruit 10 years, 15 years later of going, their parents and they're, in the workforce and they're leading small groups, they've come back and they're serving at church, they're on the worship team, all that kind of stuff is just, it's amazing to see what Jesus is doing. And
it's fun. I don't want to leave that part out. It's like, right. Sometimes, young people are more fun. Sorry.
Absolutely.
And so I enjoyed laughing and it was great.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Sometimes I forget that I'm as old as I am, and I love hanging out with younger people. And my wife sometimes doesn't have a tolerance when I act like a middle schooler with my middle schooler, and even my high schooler is like too cool for middle school right now. And so it's like, I'm jumping in, and we're skibbity brained and loving it. So, So Jesus is leading you and your wife, family into a new direction here. When you came and spoke, you talked about a situation which it stuck with me, and I gone back to it. That you talked about the story where Jesus was leading his disciples into kind of an unclean and scary situation, and you just asked that question, like, well, why? Why was Jesus doing that? And his purpose to heal a guy had 1,000 demons in him or more, and
Which that's plenty.
plenty.
Yeah.
Dealing with one is plenty.
Yeah.
I've experienced that, but I had never read the story that way or picked up on it, that sense of like, yeah, why was Jesus leading that? Because he had this guy in mind. I mean, you talk through it, and anyways, Jesus is leading you guys in a new situation. Does it feel scary? Does it feel where are you at? I guess in the process, and because this is a new adventure, and we're not young people who haven't lived life. We're not 20 or 22 now. And so what you talked about a little bit, but I'd love to circle back around on it. New church means new people. And yeah, to share your heart a little bit about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. You said new direction. I actually don't feel like it's new direction because it still feels like one step in front of the other. And this just happens to be the next step. And I used to get asked a lot because I'm not good at hypotheticals. People would say, "What's your 10-year plan? What's your 5-year plan?"
Yeah.
And there are things I dream about or things I want to see, but because my brain is so concrete, I wanted to be like this, and this, and I would spin out a little bit, and I got to a point where I would just say, "I just want to be faithful," and I'd seen enough people walk away from their faith, and praise God, I've seen people come back too after that, or they'd blow their lives up with some major sin or leave the church or what, and I just thought, man, none of this is worth it if I can't end and just go, I still love Jesus and he still loves me. And so I've really held on to that. I want to be faithful, but the problem with that, and this becomes real nuanced because I don't think what I was desiring was bad. But this past year I was praying about that, okay, God, I'll do whatever it is. We'll go plant a church. We'll go do whatever. I want to be faithful to whatever it is. But I felt like there was a moment where I took an extended time away from prayer. And it was just a reminder where Jesus said, I want you to want me as much as you want to be faithful to me. And I don't want to separate those things necessarily to say, my faithfulness to Christ is different than my desire for him. I want to integrate those things. Yeah. And so I really, that's why I say it's not a new direction, because it's like, I just want to know Jesus more. I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection, Paul would say. And that's true for me. I really want to know the resurrected Jesus more and more. And because of that, I want faith to go from without. So this feels like the next direction in a step of faith. So because of that, then I'm relying on Jesus to do all the heavy lifting. I can't save anybody, but I'll try to be as bold as I can in proclaiming the gospel of goodness of Jesus and calling people to turn from their dead, sinful lives and jump into full, abundant life. And I like being with people. I like being with people that I like too. And so to be able to together just be on mission in Spokane to see, Spokane as it is in heaven, to hopefully see the kingdom work, the restoring work of Jesus. It's something I'm excited to see. So yeah, we're jumping in. We're with Summit, and right now the journey is getting trained and overloading my brain with all kinds of stuff. But that's been good too. But I think I'm eager to get running, and yeah, so that's where we are.
Yeah, I think it's super important. I'm glad you clarified that it's not a new direction for you, because I do think I feel that same way, and I feel like I asked a bad question there, because it is just the faithfulness one step in front of the other, following Jesus and whatever the iteration is.
Well, let me just affirm you in this real quick. That was a bad question.
Correct. No, I'm trying to get better at it.
And I think it's a great.
Because it is the tension of, well, what's 5 and 10 years? I don't know. We're only promised today, and be faithful for what it is right in front of us and what God's saying, and not that we don't have vision for the future, but holding both of those appropriately is always a tension to be managed. And I agree. I think we get too much on the external life, and Jesus is so focused on the inner life. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to just work for God and be busy with the things of God and miss out on God. I'm so focused on being faithful to Jesus that I miss Jesus in the midst of it. And I do think there's a nuanced thing that I think a lot of us can relate to if we get so busy with the things of God, good things, giving and praying and Bible reading, but yet we somehow miss out on Jesus. I've been soaking in on that. There's been a couple things in my life recently have just highlighted that. Like this time when Jesus was going through town, he got invited by a couple ladies to come over, one lady to come over and hang out at their house, have dinner, and one gets super busy with making a big meal because Jesus had a crew. So I'm sure there was a lot of mouths to feed. And the sister sits down at Jesus' feet and is just soaking in time with Jesus. And the other sister who's busy preparing the meal comes up and goes, "This is Jesus. Isn't this unfair?" This is total like sibling thing. Like, "Mom, Dad, do you not see what's happening?" And Jesus says to her, "Man, you're so worried about all these details. And you're missing the big picture." And Martha is the one with the details. Mary's the one sitting at Jesus' feet, and Mary's soaking in and being with Jesus. And I don't know. That's been hitting me. And like we get so focused on the external, all the details, and like the inner life, that our heart would be following Jesus deeply, and not so concerned with all the details. But yet they just seem so important at times.
Yeah, super good. And I just think that's, again, my story's similar. And I think there's something about it with people with youth ministry, right, that I always want to ask you what's next, right? Because just hanging out with youth forever is never good enough.
And we both did it forever.
Yeah, I was like,
are you going to get a real job ever?
Yeah.
You going to make something of your lives?
Because that was me. People would be like, "Hey, what's next?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'm just being faithful. I know that God's called me to love middle school and high school students in Spokane." Like that's just, and that was my answer forever. And then, people would say, "Hey, you want to move over here, do this job? Do you want to come over here?" And every time I'd bring it before God, I'm like, "God, what is next?" Because, there's something to be said, and you put this in there too. Like, I want to have vision and direction for my life and have a momentum in following after God. But like when God is clear of like, this is what I've called you to do: play guitar at your youth group, lead students in worship, serve me here. And so, again, when people ask you, "Well, what's next? What's next?" I don't know. I'm being faithful to love middle school and high school students in Spokane. And then as you just explore, like, okay, God, how are you growing me? What gifts have you given me? What passions have you given me? And how can we do that? It doesn't have to feel like a crazy new direction or a crazy shift of everything. It's just, I'm just being faithful within this season, what God's given me, how he's gifted me, and the place where I'm planted to help people find and follow him.
Because we never know what Jesus is fully up to, and sometimes we'll meet someone in a day or something will happen, and it's significant, and it wasn't on the 5-year plan. The people we meet and the things that happen weren't on the detailed plan. We couldn't see it coming, but it's definitely God at work, and you just be faithful with that. Like God, speaks to us, and sometimes it's really helpful that we don't have all the details, because then it actually means we have to keep following him and not drift away or get off track. We keep in step with him. Because if I knew too much, I'd be like, cool, good, got it. I'm going to keep running. I got this. I don't need you. I'll check in later maybe if I feel like I do need you. So
it'd be fun to do a study of Jesus and the things where he was interruptible, like the places he was interruptible, and the things where he said, "I don't interrupt this for anything." This is what, and you could probably see that because there are things that Jesus would interrupt. I think he's doing so much ministry, healing people and preaching, and it says early in the morning while it was still dark, he went away to pray. And he interrupted what we would have thought would be like gangbuster ministry, and he interrupts it to go spend time with the Father. Or he won't go to Jerusalem, and they're all going, "Go, go, go," and he's like, "Not yet, I'm not interrupting this," and he goes around these little towns, all around Galilee. But at the same time, in those towns, he gets interrupted by a blind man, by a demoniac, by, the Mary and Martha dispute, and the things that Jesus was saying, this is worth the interruption, and this isn't, or this is the thing that I won't even be interrupted by good things. It'd be fun to see some of that, because that does feel like life, where you go, I have the 5-year plan. I know definitively this is what God's called me to do, and I'm not going to stray off of this. But at the same time, you guys have probably experienced us doing church work here where God's just opening doors, and you're like, well, I guess we have this kind of ministry now because God does that. And I was talking to someone a little bit ago, and they had like a big plan for their church. He was a pastor, and all of a sudden, single moms started coming to the church, just tons of them. And he's like, I guess we have a single mom ministry now. And it wasn't what he was planning,
Right.
but that's what God had done. And so, am I open to be interrupted on that stuff? I hope so. And I'm eager. I'm excited for church for that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Oh, let's make the pivot. I love the pivot. But I also want to know deep down that core thing of this is what we're doing and we're not moving from this. But because of that, it almost gives you the freedom to be interrupted, you know?
Yeah.
Very good.
I think that you should do that study. I'll read it once you figure that out.
Hey, if I do the work, I'm keeping the work. I'm
okay.
hiding it in my own heart.
I'll type it into Chat GPT when we're done in this meeting. Let them do the work for me.
See what comes up. Because I think we say it's the interruption, and Jesus is saying this is the mission.
Yeah.
I think there's a kingdom of God upside down inversion there. Because as you're talking, I'm like starting to. His cousin John the Baptist died, got murdered, and he's off grieving. And then thousands of people show up, and he goes, "Well, guess what we're doing? I'm preaching, I'm teaching, I'm healing, and thousands of people are there. So what's he going to do? He goes, grief time, funeral. I need me time. Go away. No, he goes, come, let's heal, let's teach. And then he sends everybody away, disciples, and then he sends all the people away, and he finally has a moment. And we would go, bad time management, Jesus. Take a you first time. And he was perfect on how he lived. So I think it would be very interesting discovery.
Yeah, I
there.
think that of the Bible, I think the character of Jesus probably is worth studying.
It's a great revelation. Thanks for bringing that to the podcast.
Yeah, I think there's even more than what we're talking about.
Maybe just a little bit more than what we got
Slightly
for 30
more.
minutes.
Yeah. Kyle and I were having that conversation a couple of days ago about we're going to walk through the Sermon on the Mount the next few weeks here. And just like, yeah, this is what Jesus taught. If it worked for him on his city-to-city tour of telling people what the kingdom of God is like and what to do, I think it's probably good enough for us to do. You know? Like, it's pretty plain and simple. Like, this is who Jesus is and what he's about. And it's the inner life and it's the everyday life. And it's in the little moments as we are going, make disciples, not create a summer camp or a one-time missions trip or a big mountaintop event. That's where the disciples are made. It's as you are going in proximity, and God in us is working through us to help those around us. So, yeah.
I do love a good summer camp, though.
Yes.
Right?
Good event.
Like, that's a pivot. We're doing, summer camp. I find myself at camp the last 4 summers, directing UGM
That's right,
camp.
yeah.
I didn't see that 5 years ago, but it was one of those things. God brought it to our attention. We saw it, and I go, well, I guess I'm doing that now. And every year there's a struggle, inner struggle, spiritual battle, and significance. And then yet there's another student just got baptized on Sunday, and he was
That's
part
so
of
fun.
our outreach to our community through Trent Elementary and our mission club after school program, and coming to camps and hearing about Jesus. And he got baptized on Sunday, and I go, well, I guess that's on the bingo card. I didn't see that one coming, but. Anyways, it's following Jesus. It's wonderful, beautiful ride. So, any other thoughts?
I got lots of thoughts, but
Yeah. Nathan's probably not going to listen to this. So I'll just say at the end, probably a better guest.
Nathan for sure will listen to it.
Oh, rats.
And he knows he's a better guest than I am.
Oh, okay.
And
You're a better guest.
No,
is
no,
what
no.
I'm saying. We didn't talk
No,
enough
I knew that's
golf.
I knew that's what you meant, but he would be a better guest for sure.
Now he did
Because
do.
Nathan is funnier. Nathan is a better musician.
I don't know.
That stuff's all true. And Jonathan is better looking. And, I thought we weren't fact checking. Yeah, no, we're fact checking. And my brothers are wonderful and better. And my whole family, when I talk about the faithfulness to God in my own life, because I'm in the couch, but it's been fun to have the front seat to see God's faithfulness in the people around me's lives.
Yes.
And my family's part of that too. I've just been so grateful for God's faithfulness to my siblings and to their families and continued blessing and all that stuff. But
And that's huge. I mean, we could pause right here and then restart and do a whole nother podcast episode on the beauty of the faithfulness of God through families and through generations, and not living through the chaos and the destruction and being saved from that experience on earth. And I'm grateful for that. And again, it's I've been asked that question recently in different contexts. Like you get to this stage, I'm 45, you get to this stage of life and go, how are you different than this person? And it's literally genuinely, my answer is Jesus. It's not perfect, but Amy and I, we're just trying to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, how do you guys stick together and go through the hard times? And Jesus. It's our spending time in the morning before the kids get up, praying together, reading the scriptures together, and then throughout the day, centered around Jesus. Like, there's no other answer for life, and I don't know where else we find life. So it's just the faithfulness of parents and people around us. So, yeah, it's Jesus. But I like giving Nathan a hard time too. So we didn't talk as much golf as his episode, and he did do a baby gender reveal on his episode. So I don't know if you have any revealing. They on their second kid, they hadn't publicly said what the sex was of their second kid, and he's like, "Yeah, we're having a boy."
Did they have a second kid? Oh,
you should check in. Maybe send a gift or something.
Should check in.
Yeah.
I feel like you reveal. You're talking publicly about planting a church and stuff. That's revealing stuff. That's pretty cool. Not everybody knows.
Is that
about
breaking news?
It's newer news.
News.
Yeah. Breaking news.
For all the David Lewellyn fan club out there, we're gonna have so much clickbait from a podcast featuring David Lewellyn.
Breaking news here.
It's like a highlight on YouTube. There's algorithms and stuff. We're gonna have lots of viewership.
Yeah, well, hey, let's talk about something salacious then. If we're looking for clickbait, let's...
Planting new churches in Spokane.
Okay.
Well, we appreciate you coming on the podcast, and more than that, we appreciate your heart for following Jesus faithfully day after day, and we're grateful for your friendship and your contribution to our community, and we're grateful for your contribution to bringing the kingdom of God on earth in Spokane in all the ways that you're doing that. So thanks for being on today's episode.
Thank you.
All right, and to everybody out there listening, keep following Jesus and whatever he has for you today, and be faithful in that next step, following him. And we love you, and we'll see you on the next episode.